What is up, everybody? Welcome back. You need to know about expansionary and contractionary monetary policy, and I got you. So let's go. And don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe while the music plays. This lesson is really the culmination of Units 3 and 4 combined. This unit has been all about the financial system and money creation and interest rates and all that. But this is a macro class, so the question is, how does all that affect the economy writ large? Specifically, remember our big three measures: real GDP, unemployment, and inflation. We want to know how monetary policy affects each of these. Let's start at the beginning, a very good place to start. Monetary policy is basically managing the money supply and interest rates. Unlike fiscal policy, which is conducted by Congress and the President, monetary policy is conducted by a nation's central bank. In the United States, that means the Federal Reserve, often referred to simply as the Fed, conducts monetary policy, managing the money supply and interest rates. The job of the Federal Reserve is to fulfill the dual mandate from Congress to achieve price stability and maximum sustainable employment. In English, that means the Fed is supposed to manage inflation and help move the economy towards the full employment level of output. In fact, beginning in 2012, the Fed began inflation targeting, setting a 2% inflation rate as the explicit goal of monetary policy. Now you might wonder which goal takes precedence. Not everybody agrees. People who believe that full employment is more important are often referred to as inflation doves, while people who believe that price stability is more important are called inflation hawks. For whatever it's worth, the AP Macro course outline specifically identifies price stability as the Fed's goal. Now we're ready for expansionary monetary policy. The goal of an expansionary policy, whether it's fiscal or monetary, is to increase real GDP and reduce unemployment, and should be employed when the economy is facing a recessionary gap. I told you, Unit 3 is back, baby! So here's our ADAS model with our economy in a recessionary gap, also known as a negative output gap, because actual output is less than potential output. And just like expansionary fiscal policy, the goal of policymakers is to shift the AD curve to the right to close this gap. But the way it works specifically is pretty different. Okay, so we're going to leave that model there for a minute and then come back to the options that the Fed has if they want to implement expansionary monetary policy. Recall that with limited reserves, the Fed has three main policy tools: changing the reserve requirement, discount rate, or conducting open market operations. In an economy with ample reserves, the Fed also has control over administered interest rates. And through these tools, the Fed is able to increase or decrease the money supply and in turn to raise or lower nominal interest rates. When the Fed is implementing expansionary monetary policy, the goal is to increase the money supply and lower interest rates. That means that they can decrease the reserve requirement, lower the discount rate, or conduct open market purchases of treasury bonds. And if we're in an economy with ample reserves, they can lower the administered interest rates. For more info on how those policy tools specifically work, check out part 1 of this lesson. Let's look at our money market model and see how these actions affect it. Okay, so we're here in equilibrium at the intersection of the money supply and money demand curves. When the Fed chooses any of their expansionary options, it shifts the money supply curve to the right. This increases the quantity of money, but more importantly, it lowers the nominal interest rate. The reason this is so important is because the nominal interest rate represents the cost of money, and as such, it directly impacts borrowing. Borrowers prefer low interest rates because it means that the cost of their loan is cheaper. Here's an example. Say a person is thinking about borrowing $100,000. If the nominal interest rate is 2%, they'll pay $2,000 in interest, while if the interest rate is 7%, they'll pay $7,000. Most loans are actually a little bit more complicated than this, but the idea that borrowers owe less when the interest rate is lower is the point. The reason that this matters is because the entire point of expansionary monetary policy is to increase borrowing and in turn to increase aggregate demand. Since most investment spending is financed by borrowing money, there is a negative or inverse relationship between the interest rate and investment spending. To a lesser extent, but still significantly, lots of consumer spending is also financed by borrowing money, so the same negative relationship holds here as well. The important thing is that the lower nominal interest rate leads to an increase in both investment and consumer spending. And you can see where this is going. We know that AD equals C plus I plus G plus XN, so that means our AD curve will shift to the right as a result of expansionary monetary policy. And because you know multiple choice questions like to ask you this kind of thing, here's everything I can think of that they could ask you as a result of monetary policy, at least that you've already learned. Money supply increases, nominal interest rate falls, investment and consumption rises, AD increases, price level and real GDP increase, and bond prices increase. That one isn't important for the story we're telling here, but they love to ask that. Remember that there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices. Okay, so that's expansionary monetary policy. Let's look at contractionary monetary policy now. The great thing is that it's the same exact logic, just everything the opposite direction. So let's start again with our ADAS model. Contractionary policy is used to slow down an overheating economy in an inflationary gap like this. This is also called a positive output gap since actual output is greater than potential output. Okay, so back to the Fed. Again, they have their tools for contractionary monetary policy. In a limited reserve economy, they can increase the reserve requirement, raise the discount rate, and conduct open market sales of Treasury securities. In an ample reserve economy, they would raise the administered interest rates. We can see the outcome of these policies immediately on the money market model. Our model is in equilibrium, and then the MS curve shifts left as a result of these policies. This decreases the quantity of money and, more importantly, raises the nominal interest rate. The higher nominal interest rate discourages interest-sensitive spending, making it more expensive to borrow. As a result, both investment and consumer spending will decrease. Over on our ADS model, this causes the AD curve to shift to the left, bringing down the price level, which was the real goal of this policy. We can do the same thing as we did for the last one and have a graphic that summarizes all of the changes that result from the contractionary monetary policy. Money supply decreases, nominal interest rates rise, investment and consumption fall, AD decreases, price level and real GDP decrease, and bond prices decrease. We'll learn more about this in Unit 5, but I want you to know now that central banks can only influence nominal interest rates in the short run. That means that monetary policy can only affect real GDP in the short run and is ineffective in the long run. And lastly, there's also the disclaimer that in the real world, there are lags to monetary policy. While monetary policy is less laggy than fiscal policy, the recognition lag is still a problem, as central banks first need the data that shows the state of the economy before they can take action. For example, in the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009, as late as the summer of 2008, 7 to 9 months into the recession, the Fed was more concerned about inflation than unemployment and chose not to cut interest rates in large part because they didn't have the data to understand the actual condition of the economy at that time. Additionally, it's estimated that it usually takes about 6 months from a rate cut to see the impact on GDP. So again, you have another lag there. All right, everybody, great job once again. That's monetary policy. So until next time, this has been a La Money production. Thanks again for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and to ring that bell, and check out the description for a link to get the answers to these practice questions, as well as notes for the unit and a great review book I've written, and I will see you in the next video.